discretion is advised. This is 10-Minute Murder.
Born in California in 1946, Gerald Gallego's childhood was rough from the very start. His mother was a sex worker, and she also frequently brought home clients so that they could sexually abuse Gerald. Gerald's father was a criminal, and he was estranged from the family, and he was no better. When Gerald was 9 years old, his father became the first person to be executed by gas chamber in Mississippi. With this pedigree, it might not be such a surprise that Gerald's criminal record began at the age of 10, after he broke into and robbed a house in his neighborhood. By the age of 12, he was a sex offender after molesting a 6-year-old. As a young boy, Gerald had only ever seen adult relationships that were abusive and unstable. As an adult, he followed this pattern, marrying a total of 6 women and then inevitably leaving them once they could no longer financially support him. In fact, he was married to someone else when he met the woman who would become his next wife and then accomplice, the one person who had matched his level of depravity, Charlene Williams. Charlene's upbringing could not have been more different to Gerald's. Her parents were well off because of her father's successful business, but when her mother was in a car accident, Charlene effectively became the woman of the house, doing the cooking and cleaning while her father was away on business trips. It was a lot of responsibility for a young girl, and in her teenage years and early 20s, it was clear that it had taken its toll on Charlene. At first, it was just alcohol. Then it was harder drugs, and a reputation as the office nymphomaniac. Despite rumors of Charlene's flirtatious behavior with her male colleagues, it's actually possible that she was a lesbian. One of her ex-husbands, a heroin addict, later stated that Charlene had insisted on having threesomes with him and a female prostitute. Another married man who Charlene later had an affair with broke off that affair when Charlene wanted to have a threesome with him and his wife. And so far in the story, it sounds a lot like a Jerry Springer episode. R.I.P. Jerry. But it's going to get much, much worse. After this breakup, Charlene tried to take her own life, but she survived, just in time to meet Gerald Gallego at a Sacramento poker club. Sparks flew immediately. 1 week later, Charlene moved in with Gerald, despite him currently being married to another woman. Gerald was a sadist who enjoyed inflicting pain on his partners, and Charlene took up a submissive role in their sexual relationship. Later, she claimed that she hated the way that he hurt her, but decided to put up with it because of her love for him. At the time, it seemed as if Gerald's sexual fantasies opened up new doors for Charlene, allowing her to explore things about herself that she never had before. Several months into their relationship, Gerald brought home a gift for Charlene, a 16-year-old girl who worked as an exotic dancer. He wanted to have a threesome, but he wanted it to be all about him. He didn't want Charlene to touch the girl. The girl stayed in the house when Gerald went to work, and when he arrived home, he found that Charlene and the 16-year-old were having sexual intercourse. Gerald flew into a rage, picking up the teenager and throwing her through a window, and then viciously beating Charlene. From that day forward, Gerald was no longer interested in having a sexual relationship with Charlene. He told her that his libido was gone. However, Charlene believed that he was cheating on her. After 1 year of this, Charlene was desperate. When Gerald confessed to her that he believed having a couple of sex slaves would fix his libido, Charlene eagerly agreed to find 2 girls and bring them home to him. It's possible that this arrangement wasn't just serving Gerald. It also allowed Charlene to act on the attraction to women that she'd been suppressing most of her life. On the 26th of June, 1978, a 16-year-old girl named Sandra K. Butler vanished in Nevada. Police decided that Sandra had probably run away from home and never investigated the possibility that she had been kidnapped. Her body was never found. Gerald and Charlene never confessed to having any involvement in Sandra's disappearance. But 1 year later, they kidnapped 2 teenage girls from almost the exact location Sandra had been when she went missing. On the 10th of September, 1978, Charlene lured 16-year-old Kippy Vaught and 17-year-old Rhonda Scheffler into the back of her van. The two girls were tied up, repeatedly sexually abused, beaten, and then shot execution style in the head. Kippy survived the first bullet because she had moved her head just as Gerald fired the gun, but he then shot again 3 more times, making sure that she was dead. The next set of victims were even younger. 13-year-old Sandra Colley and her friend, 14-year-old Brenda Judd. They vanished from Washoe County Fair in June 1979. Charlene and Gerald had tricked them into their van, telling the girls that they would pay them for handing out flyers. Instead, with the girls locked in the vehicle, Charlene began to drive. In the rearview mirror, she could see Gerald sexually assaulting both of the children while she drove down the interstate. After they parked the van in a remote area, Charlene took over, sexually assaulting both victims while Gerald then watched. When Gerald got bored, he grabbed a shovel and used it to hit Sandra in the head, not stopping until she was dead. He then killed Brenda, dug a deep hole in the ground, and buried both girls. It was believed for the next 4 years that Brenda and Sandra were just runaways, and their disappearance was barely investigated until Charlene confessed to killing them. Gerald continued to demand that Charlene help him find victims, just as casually as you might order a cup of coffee. Before the couple abducted 17-year-old friends Stacy Redican and Karen Chipman Twiggs, Gerald had woken Charlene up in the morning by telling her, quote, "I want a girl, get up." 2 months later, Stacy and Karen's remains were found buried in shallow graves, partially eaten by coyotes. Both girls had died from massive blunt force trauma to the head after being sexually assaulted. Although Gerald and Charlene are only confirmed to have killed 11 people, most of whom were underage girls, authorities suspect that they killed even more. Because of their habit of killing victims in remote locations and multiple of their victims being falsely reported as runaways, there's a very good chance that the remains of their other victims have just not been found. During their last killing, Gerald and Charlene deviated from their pattern. They abducted and killed a male victim. When Gerald saw Craig Miller and his fiancée Mary standing on the roadside, he pulled the car over and ordered them into the vehicle at gunpoint. He shot Craig in the back of the head when they arrived at a remote location nearby, then shot him twice more to make sure that he was dead. Mary watched in horror, unable to help her fiancé. Gerald and Charlene then transported Mary back to their apartment, where they sexually assaulted her for several hours before killing her. However, Gerald and Charlene had been careless and impulsive in their abduction of the couple. One of Craig and Mary's friends had seen the entire altercation and remembered the license plate of the car driven by the kidnappers. With the plate number, police zeroed in on the two suspects, Gerald and Charlene Gallego. They were quickly taken into custody and pleaded not guilty to the charges against them. In 1983, Gerald Gallego was sentenced to death in California for killing Craig and Mary. The following year, he received another death sentence in Nevada for the murders of Stacy and Karen. Charlene's attorney had convinced the courts to offer a reduced sentence if she agreed to testify against her husband, which she did. Despite her involvement in at least 11 murders, and most likely more, she was now only facing 16 years of jail time. During her time behind bars, Charlene told one of her fellow prisoners how ecstatic she felt during the torture and murder of Kippy and Rhonda. Charlene's sentence finished in 1997, and after her release, she gave interviews where she claimed that she had also been a victim of Gerald's, despite admitting to enjoying the killings and taking such an active role in the abductions. Quote, "There were victims who died," she said, "and there were victims who lived. It's taken me a hell of a long time to realize that I'm one of the ones who lived." To this day, Charlene Gallego is a free woman. That is 10-Minute Murder for today. Brief and bingeable true crime. I'm Joe, I'm the host, and thank you for listening today. And I've been answering these questions that come in sporadically on different episodes. So I figured I'd answer another one in this episode. This one comes from Joe in Alabama. Joe says, "Hey, Joe, what's up with your voice today? Why do you sound like that?" Well, it's a good question, Joe. I'd love to tell you. That's because I was sitting out by the fire pit earlier today and was just breathing in smoke. It was relaxing out there, and I knew the smoke was coming in my face, and I was just like, okay, well, I'm fine with this, I guess. And now I sound like this, and it won't go away. I've had 2.5 bottles of water, and it's still with me. So I don't feel bad. It's just the way that it sounds right now. And I could either not do an episode or I could do an episode. So I hope that helps, Joe. It did. Thank you. If this is your first time listening to the 10 Minute Murder, please subscribe now so that you can catch up on all the back episodes, never miss any of the new ones. Connect with me on social media, see the visuals of what we're talking about here in the podcast. And if you like this episode, please leave a rating and review on Apple or Spotify, any place that's possible. Your positive feedback is very much appreciated. Go to 10minutemurder.com for all things related to 10 Minute Murder. Have a good one.